Hello! Welcome back to the Terra Devlog, a survival and exploration game set on your very own planet. And thank you all so much for 2,000 subscribers. I really appreciate it. Let's keep it going, so don't forget to subscribe. In the last episode, we implemented a new inventory system for Terra, and in the end, we celebrated it by making a cozy campfire while watching the beautiful sunset. Now, I can really easily make this beautiful sunset by using a fantastic feature of Unreal Engine called the Sky Atmosphere, which basically gives you a real-time atmosphere that's based on real physical values. The Sky Atmosphere system calculates light scattering, atmospheric density, color gradients, and so on, and simulates how light interacts with the particles in the air. It makes it really easy to make transitions from night to day in real time, and also it gives my planet an actual atmosphere. So when I look at the planet from outer space, I get this beautiful and realistic atmosphere layer around my planet. It truly is an amazing feature, but it has some issues when it comes to smaller planets, such as the one in Terra. You see, this atmosphere is designed to use real-world planetary physics, which work perfectly well for a large planet like Earth or Mars. If you look at this, the default radius of this atmosphere is the size of the Earth's actual atmosphere. But to make it fit for my little planet, which is way smaller than Earth, I have to set the radius incredibly low, and when I do so, the default physical calculations start to break down. As you can see, now when the atmosphere is this small, when I try to make a sunset, it does not get this beautiful orange color that we would expect on a real planet. And also, the resolution of the atmosphere is reduced drastically, resulting in weird and ugly visual artifacts in our sky. So to get the orange sunset that I wanted in my last video, I had to sort of fake it by increasing the radius of the atmosphere a lot and try to place my camera in a smart angle so I can hide the big line in the horizon. But I don't want to fake it forever, so in this video I will try to find an alternative solution to the default atmosphere, which will work on a smaller planet and hopefully also give us some more artistic control. And last but not least, give us the beautiful orange sunset we expect without crazy annoying artifacts. And this means I would have to dive into the topic of shaders. What is it, why is it, and how is it? That is the question. And very simply, how I have understood this is that a shader is basically code that is ran on the GPU. That's all. And since the GPU is designed to work extremely efficiently with visual stuff, shaders are mostly designed to explain to the GPU what the visual stuff will look like. And an atmosphere is indeed something visual, and therefore we'll need to use shaders to explain what our atmosphere will look like. Hopefully that all makes sense. And after a few Google searches, it seems like a common approach when making custom atmosphere shaders is to head over to a website dedicated to shaders called ShaderToy and take some inspiration from there. Or like me and probably most of us, just copy the code and hope it works. Heading back to Unreal, the simplest way to use custom shader code is to use the material graph, which you all probably know well already. It's basically a visual way of making shader code using nodes and stuff. And one of these nodes is called the custom node, where you can write your own custom HLSL code and then plug it right into your material output, just like any other material node. Very nice. So I'll just click the custom node and paste in the code from ShaderToy and enjoy my new atmosphere. Yeah, this was not the result I was hoping for. You see, ShaderToy uses a shader language called GLSL, while Unreal uses HLSL. Luckily, the differences between these aren't massive, so after reading up on what is needed to translate GLSL over to Unreal HLSL and a lot of tweaking, I actually got something that reminded a bit of a circular atmosphere. I got some really cool results, and I loved playing around with the colors and sliders to see what would happen. This approach unfortunately has some downsides though. First of all, it uses post-processing to render the atmosphere, which means that I would still have the issue where I can only have one planet in my solar system that has an atmosphere, and I would like the possibility to add some more in the future. Also, it is very complex. It has all these weird settings that I don't really understand, and because it's physically accurate, it's also pretty heavy for the GPU to render. And for Terra, I don't necessarily need the most realistic and physically accurate atmosphere. As long as it looks good and provides some artistic flexibility, I'm happy. So taking what I learned from the shader toy code, I tried to make my own simplified atmosphere, which would hopefully be a bit more performant but a bit less realistic. I made some cool looking effects, accidentally made a black hole, sorry about that, but it didn't take long before I realized I really had no idea what I was doing. One thing I've learned about myself is that I tend to dive into complex tasks like this with a lot of overconfidence, thinking I'll learn as I go and reach the end goal right away, like just heading straight for the final boss in a game without the necessary skills or equipment. So I quickly get discouraged and everything just seems impossible. This atmosphere is a perfect example of that, so after taking a step back and celebrating Christmas with my family, I thought, alright, time to learn this shader stuff the proper way, starting with the basics. So I found a great playlist on YouTube from Render Bucket, which explained how custom HLSL worked in Unreal, starting from the very bottom and moving up gradually to more complex shaders like ray marching. I highly recommend having a look at his series if you're interested in shader stuff. It's very educational and unlocks a whole new dimension for artists, which is very cool and probably very useful for a lot of you. And using his videos, I learned how to make a ray march texture, such as this, where you get sick depth effects using only a grayscale image. I bragged a bit about it to you guys on my Discord. Then I went on to learning about ray marched shapes in 3D space. Ray marching using shaders allows you to render basically any shape that you can recreate with math on the GPU. I also learned how to shade it so it looks like an actual 3D model, which was really cool. So after this, I had a better understanding of how shaders and ray marching worked under the hood, and I got a bit closer to understanding how these atmospheres calculate their angles, lights, and colors to make the effects actually visible on the screen. I also accidentally made this scary alien monster face, which I decided to scare my Discord members with. But although I now had some cool 3D textures, the atmosphere was still not done. Far from it, unfortunately. As you might remember from my Planet Terrain video, I'm using the voxel plugin to create voxel terrain for my planet. I'm also a fairly active member on their Discord channel and try to stay updated with everything going on over there. And one thing that is pretty cool about their Discord community is that a lot of people share their projects and how they solved a lot of the same issues that I'm dealing with in Terra. And one of the members who is regularly posting updates about their project is Trouble in Space. His work kept catching my eye because it was kind of similar to Terra, and especially because he seemed to have solved the atmosphere problem really well. It looked natural even on smaller planets, and the colors seemed to look very beautiful as well. Really cool stuff. And then one day I noticed that he had joined my Discord channel as well. So I decided to reach out and ask for some guidance on how he handled the atmosphere stuff, and he gladly shared his knowledge, which I really appreciate. And he also shared the shaders that he had been working on and let me dig through his code a bit, which was incredibly educational. I learned a lot of good practices when it comes to custom shader code, and also just having a working solution to mess around with gave me a lot of inspiration and boosted my motivation to keep working on it. So thank you so much for that, Trouble in Space. It helped a lot. All the atmosphere solutions seem to have one thing in common, though. They were all pretty hard for the GPU to handle, as there are hundreds of calculations being done to find the correct color of the sky for each pixel on the screen. So it's really no wonder. I read somewhere that a common way of getting around this performance issue was to pre-compute all the atmosphere colors into textures, and then just sampling these textures instead of doing all the calculations every frame. This sounded like a great approach, so I did some research to figure out how. I quickly realized that this pre-computation stuff unfortunately was not possible using the simple custom HLSL node in the material graph. Luckily, I found that someone called SweetBiz had uploaded their solution to pre-computed atmospheres in Unreal on GitHub. So I downloaded the project to have a look at their approach with the goal of figuring out how to recreate it for Terra. This led me to the introduction of USF and USH files, which is the other, more complex way of creating shaders in Unreal. This is more difficult and requires more setup, but in the end it allows for more flexibility. Just like how C++ is more complex than Blueprints, but gives another dimension of possibilities for your code. So I made a new project following a guide on how to set up your engine to work with these shader files. and the first thing that happened was that it crashed. And at this point, I had already spent so much time on this atmosphere stuff that I was beginning to feel bad for you guys following my YouTube channel, and also I was so tired of it that I no longer enjoyed sitting down to work on Terra. So I just decided to use the Precomputed Atmosphere code as it was and try to build on top of it instead. I believe that for my use case, this solution is perfect, so why reinvent the wheel and grow old before I have something similar when I can instead just try to modify it for Terra and move on from this shader nightmare. I think I really need that now. But I learned a lot from this shader adventure though, most of all that I'm never going to be a graphics programmer, but maybe I'll try again in the future with some less complex and less important stuff. So moving on, I will use this Precomputed Atmosphere solution by SweetBiz as the base of my atmospheric stuff for Terra and build on top of it to make it look and feel the way I want. The link to the GitHub is in the description if you want to check it out. That brings us to another issue that all the atmosphere solutions so far has had, and that is the color of the sunlight. Although the sky is changing color based on how high or low the sun is to create blue skies and red sunsets, the light from the sun which actually hits the world is not changing. It is still purely white. And this is an issue as it makes the ground look overexposed and physically wrong. So if there's a red sunset, we would expect the color of the light to also naturally be like a red hue. To combat this, I made a simple function that would adjust the color of the sunlight based on the angle it hits the character. I made the color gradient editable with some color curves, so we can easily change how the sunlight looks based on what time of day it is where we're currently standing on a planet. It is a simple solution that I once again might change later, but it gives a bit of a more physically correct feel, with the added bonus that making artistic changes is pretty easy with the color curves. But there's also one more annoying problem with custom atmospheres. Most of them can't handle Skylight. And if you're wondering what Skylight is, it is basically this extra ambient lighting that brightens up shadows based on the color of the sky, so that they don't look unnaturally dark. Without it, you'd end up with these completely black shadows that just look wrong. But I figured out a cool workaround using post-processing to basically fake the Skylight effect. Because basically what I wanted was to have everything slightly lit up, even the shadowy parts. And post-processing gives me access to two versions of my scene. One without any lighting, where we just have the raw colors of everything. And one with all the lighting applied. And by blending a tiny bit of the unlit version on top of the normally lit scene, I get exactly what I want. Shadows that aren't completely black and look much more natural. This also gives the whole scene a bit of a more cartoony feel, which I kinda like and seems pretty fitting for Terra. What do you think? This is how it looks without the added fake light, and this is with. Let me know in the comments. For the stars, I'm taking a bit of inspiration from Astroneer. I love the low poly triangle look of their stars and want to recreate something similar for Terra. I made a particle system that will constantly spawn new stars in a giant sphere around the player. Then I can make these particles blink a bit and give them some randomized color variations and random sizes. I also made the stars disappear based on the angle it is to the sun, so that we wouldn't have stars during the day. I also made it so that if you're moving out of the atmosphere, the stars would reappear, making for a beautiful star sky on both the planet's surface during the night, and if you're traveling in space. I also made these small shooting stars that will appear from time to time, which adds a nice, magical and realistic touch to the sky. I might add some more elements to the stars in the future, but for now I'm happy with how this looks. For the sun, I decided to make a low poly sphere and mess with the topology bit to make it look like some sort of organic molten lava shape. This won't really be visible as it is going to be super bright and glowing, but anyways, it's a simple sphere so it doesn't take a lot of time to make some details on it for fun. Then in the material, I made a world position offset to place it super far away from the player at the same angle as my directional light, so it always follows the light direction. Cool. This means I don't have to do any extra programming to make the sun mesh follow the light. It's all done in the material automatically. Really nice. Because all the atmospheric stuff is dynamic and will automatically change based on the sun angle, making a time of day system is actually really simple. All I need to do is to rotate my directional light at a constant speed every tick, and it will look exactly the same as if the planet itself was rotating. Cool, time of day check. In Unreal Engine, there's a great system to add realistic volumetric clouds to your atmospheres. But of course, since I am using a custom atmosphere, I can't use this. And I probably wouldn't have used this system anyways, as my goal is not to make realistic clouds, but stylistic low-poly clouds that matches with the rest of the style of Terra. So instead I decided to make a set of different low-poly cloud meshes in Blender by just copying tons of spheres into some cloud-like shapes, combining them and decreasing the poly count of them until I got the low-poly style I was looking for. Then in Unreal I made yet another particle system that would spawn these cloud meshes randomly around our planet. I also made them rotate a bit to make them move across the sky naturally. It's a very simple system, but it looks kinda cool and I think it matches the rest of my style, so I'm quite happy with it. And once again, I might change them a bit in the future to add some weather effects and such, but I won't worry about that right now. I just need some simple clouds. I struggled a bit with getting them to naturally spawn around me. I experimented with having them fade in and out with translucency, but that made them look quite ugly as Unreal tends to struggle a bit with rendering translucent meshes that overlap with each other. So I decided to go for this gradually scaling up effect, which might not be super natural, but it doesn't look too bad either. I might go back though to the translucent fade later when I have a bit more time to experiment it, but we'll see. Up until now, I've been using this small test sphere to implement all my atmospheric effects, but now it's time to implement them into the actual planet with foliage and mountains. So let's get back to our voxel planet and drop all our Terra atmosphere effects in there. And of course, it required some juggling with all the parameters and sliders, but in the end, I got it working just like in the testing scene. And honestly, I think this looks pretty cool. Some of you might be screaming at your monitors, telling me that there is something missing though. And you're right, we still don't have a moon. But for Terra, I want the moon to be a little more complicated than just a sphere in the sky. I want people to be able to actually travel there at some point. So that means that this will have to be its own voxel planet. And because this is a bit of a larger topic, I will save that for a later video. So don't worry, I haven't forgotten it, I'll just be waiting a bit with that. So that means that for now, the new atmosphere of Terra is done. It uses a custom atmosphere which works on smaller planets. We have a low poly sun, a stylized star sky, and low poly clouds orbiting our planet. Let me know what you think, and if you have any suggestions, please let me know. I'll probably focus on some other stuff next time for Terra, but I'll keep all your suggestions in mind for when I come back to the atmosphere at some point later. Alright, thank you for watching, and once again, thank you so much for 2,000 subscribers. This is a big milestone for the channel, and I love reading all your feedback and suggestions, so please keep them coming. Also, don't forget to join the Discord community with the invite link in the description. Now that the channel has started growing a bit, I'm considering making some sort of Patreon in case any of you want to support the game and devlog a bit extra. So let me know if that is something you would consider doing, and if so, I might do that in one of the next couple of devlogs. We'll see. It's a great way to expand a bit at least, and a great way to support development, so it might be a good idea for long term. Cool, thanks again for watching, and remember to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with the Terra devlog, and if you enjoyed the video, a like would bring a big smile to my face. Catch you later!